Kamusta. So I just greeted you all in Autumn and Laguna. My name is Morgan Barasa. I'm Autumn, Laguna, Apache, Tigua, and Thai, and I'm super excited to see so many faces here. I'm a member of the Red Nation, but I am also the 7th and 8th grade Native literature teacher at Native American Community Academy. So I really want to center the young people here on today's youth panel. That's why you all are here. And I really want to use and emphasize the words of Verna Teller, where she says to pass the baton, to our young people. So in centering our young people, we're going to start off with NACA student Miguel Herrera, who's going to lead us in a land acknowledgement. So Miguel, mute yourself and lead us in a land acknowledgement.
Hello, everyone. My name is Miguel Herrera, and I'm a freshman at Native American Community.
Oh no, Miguel, we lost you a little bit. Maybe if you want to start all over, apologize about that.
Sorry, where do I? I'll just restart. Hinumampiman at Taiham Gabata, Gayham Go Baf Taihamiga, Squelamian Naka Aisha Toitinawan, Monta Kubacha. Hello, everyone. My name is Miguel Herrera, and I am a freshman at Native American Community Academy. I am from the Pueblo of Isleta, and I want to thank my Tiwa ancestors and the land itself for letting us hold this panel here today on this very special day where we get to learn together about how, as young people, as young people can make change in our communities, even though some people call this place Albuquerque.
Thank you so much, Miguel, for that land acknowledgement. So now I'm going to turn it over to Connor and Mai, who are actually going to be moderating this youth panel. And they happen to also be students at Native American Community Academy and leader of the organization Flawless. So the floor is yours. Connor, if you want to introduce yourself first.
Yeah, Shanae Connor Thomas. Hi, I'm Connor. I am 14 years old and am currently attending middle school or NACA middle school for my 8th grade. I'm from Laguna Pueblo, and I'm one of the leaders in the NACA Flawless Club at my school, which is a club that is made to give a safe space to LGBTQ plus community members that are attending our school along with their allies.
Thank you so much, Connor. What about you, Mai? Do you want to give an introduction of yourself?
Gaitao Street Josh. My name is Mai Fry. I am 14 years old and I'm currently in my 8th year of middle school at the Native American Community Academy. I am also the second leader of our LGBTQ activist group, Flawless, which is basically a safe space for our queer youth in our school.
Thank you so much, Connor and Mai. And Mai, now will you go ahead and read the introductions for our incredible panelists for today?
Thank you, Ms. Barasa. I am now going to read the bios of our youth panelists. Vera Tarasosi is our youngest speaker who happens to be in the 2nd grade at the Native American Community Academy. He is also the youngest member of the Red Nation. Vera is also Diné. Kelani Martinez is a Taos and Arapaho and is a senior at Taos Academy. Jonathan Alonso is an Indigenous Two-Spirit climate activist and a community organizer from Tiwa Territory. Coming from the front lines of Laguna Pueblo, Jonathan has always understood the important role of environmental stewardship and indigeneity. Seneca Johnson is a 19-year-old and is from the Muskogee and Seminole Nations of Oklahoma. Seneca graduated from Santa Fe Indian School and is now a student at Yale University. Now, Connor will ask questions to the panelists and moderate the discussion.
All right, thank you, Mai. So, as young people, we're often told that we're too young, that we're too young to make any change, or even as young people, we ourselves believe that that we are too young to make any change. Also, as Native peoples, we're always taught to listen to our elders, which is true. We should be doing that, but we also need to think about what role young people can play in our communities. For all the panelists, what does it mean to be a leader, and what advice would you give to another young person who believes they are too young to make change? Bear, let's start with you since you're the youngest person on the panel. What does a leader mean to you, Bear?
Being nice and help people.
Is there anything else that being a leader means to you, Bear?
No, that's all.
All right, thank you for that, Bear. All right, how about we move on to Kalani? What does it mean to be a leader, and what advice would you give to another young person who believes they're too young to make any change?
What I believe to be a leader is probably just someone can do just the littlest to make a change. You don't have to do anything like too big. All your words can probably help one another with each other, make people understand. I saw a lot of leadership when I went to the red line. Line 3. And that changed my point of view of what leadership is. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Kalani. What about Jonathan? What does being a leader mean to you?
Yeah, totally. I think, most importantly, being a leader means listening to people who are closest to the issues, regardless of what area you're talking about. If we're talking about environmental justice, or we're talking about, education, anything like that, just listening to people who are closest to the problems because they have the best solutions. And I think any advice that I would give, sorry if you hear my dog crying, any advice I would give to a young person who thinks that they're too young to make change is really just look at the history, especially, our history as Indigenous people. The Standing Rock resistance movement began with the youth. The Parkland movement, the March for Our Lives movement that came after, led by the survivors from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, that was led by young people. The East LA walkouts, that was a big part of the Chicano movement in East LA, was led by young people walking out of their high school classes. And most recently, we see the climate movement being led by young people who are just sick and tired of the adults in power not making the changes and following the science that impacts our lives. So yeah, that's my advice, is really just look at the history and realize that young people have been at the forefront of creating change for a long time. And I also think, as young people, we bring a different perspective to the table, especially, littler ones, when we bring our children and young people into organizing spaces. They bring a mindset that typically thinks outside the box, and they aren't, already conforming to societal norms and things like that. And I think that perspective is also really vital to organizing spaces.
All right, yeah, I completely agree with you, Jonathan. Thank you for that. All right, now Seneca, let's move on to you.
Yeah, so I think for me, like a leader is someone who can step up in whatever that means to them to work with other people for the betterment of our communities. So kind of like alongside the advice that like Jonathan was mentioning, um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, for me growing up, I had the idea that a leader was someone who was like loud, who could make snap decisions, who was always confident and stuff like that. And that's kind of who, like, what I built up in my head, like what it meant to be a leader. But through, community organizing and all these amazing like youth movements, I've been able to learn that there's like so many different types of leadership, and that like, you don't have to just fit into one in order to be a leader. Like, we need people who can energize others, or people who can understand team dynamics, or people who are good at like planning and logistics, or people who are like public speakers, like, or people who do the research. I think there's so many different types of leadership, and it's important to recognize that every single one of those is very like vital to the movements that we're dedicating so much time, we're dedicating our lives to. And so like recognizing that you don't have to fit into a certain type of leadership is something that I think can be really helpful, because then you don't have to like hold yourself to a standard that like isn't, might not be natural for you. You can recognize your own strengths, your own weaknesses, and at least for me, it helped me see like where I can grow and what kind of people I can team up with to get the best results, so that we can complement each other's strengths. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that, Seneca. All right, so the next question is also for everybody. Given that young people spend most of their time at school, what encouragement would you like to give a young person who is disinterested in school or doesn't care to learn about any Indigenous history and current events? Bear, how about we start off with you again? What do you think? Do you think as young people it's important to care about school and Native history?
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Bear. Would you like to tell us any reason why you believe it's important?
Why is it important for people to learn about our history?
To help the people that are unhoused.
To help the people who are unhoused.
The people that are unhoused.
That's right. Because
all right, thank you, Bear. All right, how about we go to Jonathan? Jonathan, what advice and encouragement would you give to a young person who's disinterested in school and doesn't care to learn about Indigenous history or current events?
I think that, particularly when we're talking about Indigenous history and also in the context of NACA, as a NACA alumni, just knowing that it's so important to understand where we come from, and the hardships and the struggles that our ancestors had to overcome to get us where we are today. I think, the quote that resonates the most is, "We're the answer to our ancestors' prayers." I don't think they ever could have imagined where we would be or what we'd be doing today, and it's all thanks to their resiliency and what they had to persevere through. And advice I would give to young people, particularly at NACA, and I think this kind of goes into a different question as well, but don't take all the resources and the support you have at NACA for granted, because that's not something that you have at other schools. And I'll go into that in the next question.
All right, yeah. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Kalani, would you like to answer the question next?
Yes. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, of course. Given that young people spend most of their time at school, what encouragement would you like to give a young person who is disinterested in school or doesn't care to learn about Indigenous history and current events?
I believe that they'll learn about it eventually because this is everything that we walk on today. It's ours. And it's literally history. Like we all need to know history. Our own history, even ourselves. But what advice I would probably give someone, it's good to know. Like
Yeah,
we
I
need
fully
to know,
yeah.
our own
Yeah, I
history.
fully agree. It's very important to learn about.
Yes, very.
Yeah, okay. How about we move on to Seneca?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, school and being able to learn about like Indigenous history has really helped shape my understanding of the world. Because I think understanding the past, whether it's through school or like stories from my family or learning more from like my community, it helps me understand, like what's happening today, like why is it happening, who does this benefit, how can we create change, and like what barriers are in the way of that. Because I mean, I don't know, I can trace like a lot of the things that have impacted my family through, first hearing the family stories growing up and understanding like, okay, this is the path that like, my dad went through, my grandma, my mom, all these different things. And then, as I get older and I go through school, or, do my own like research online, whatever it is, then I'm able to like find all these different like policies or like larger trends that are, are happening at the same time. And it helps me understand like, why certain things happened. And if we're wanting to create any sort of, change, what we need, like exactly the steps that we're going to need to go through in order to like make any of that change, really happen, to make it substantial and to make it just. So I think for me, it just really, it helps like frame the world. And I think I'll just add that I know school can be really, really, I think school can be really difficult for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. And that it's, it's important to try our best, but also to recognize that like other forms of education aren't invalid. The stories that you might hear from your family are also a way of like educating yourself about issues and things like that. So like being able to take like little like pieces from all these different resources that are available to us to create the whole picture, I think they're really important, because what I can learn in class versus what I can learn from my friends versus like, even just like the same subject, but from different classes. Like I've had the privilege of being able to go to college and learn a little bit about, how things are framed at that level. And so being able to take pieces from all these different, all these different resources to create a whole picture, and then being able to use that to analyze the situations that we're in today has been, helpful for me. And I think can be helpful for others as well.
All right, thank you. That was a great answer, Seneca. All right, now the next questions are for each individual speaker or panelist. Bear, would you like to tell us about the community work that you've done with your family? What advice would you like to give other families about how they can create change? This message comes from our 2021 lead sponsor of NPR Music, State Farm, to celebrate their surprise.
Did you do that?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, of course. All right, Bear, can you tell us about the community work you've done with your family, and what advice would you like to give other families that want to make change?
Our grandmas and our Chase and our uncles.
Tell them about when you went to give out care packages
Our care packages.
Remember when we went out into the streets and we gave unhoused people food? Remember when we were giving burritos?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
burritos.
What do you remember about that?
The people the people that were on houses, we got them burritos and we hand them one by one.
And you did that with your mom and dad? Yeah. Would you like for other kids to be able to do that kind of stuff with their mom and dad?
Yes.
Cool. You want to let other people know about anything else about doing that?
I think that's all.
All right, that was very sweet there. Thank you. Kalani, can you tell us about Line 3 and what it was like protesting Line 3? How has your Indigenous identity or other identities influenced this work?
Yes. I took the opportunity to walk with or go with the Red Nation and the Palestinian people. That was pretty awesome. We all met up at the camps and then figured out how we can help the camps. And we all had like a job to do. More like, yeah, and then it improved my leadership a lot, probably, till because I was like watching these group people come out here all the way from other states, and just watching them was pretty amazing. And the what's his name? Nick. I forgot his last name. Sorry. Watching him, like how smart he was, it probably improved my leadership. But Line 3 was a cool experience. It's nothing like how Standing Rock was, because there's many different five camps in general, and they weren't coming together with like in one, but that could have probably improved. What else? But I got to meet some really cool people, and it came to a good thing. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalani. I fully agree with that. I've always also believed that protesting is very important to start doing, especially from a young age, because it just teaches you how to stick up for what you love and stand against what you believe is wrong. And it's always important to be able to express those kind of feelings and not be afraid to tell people what you think. So protesting is always great, and so it's amazing that you got to protest in Line 3. But moving on, Jonathan, you've been a part of a lot of community organizations throughout New Mexico. Can you tell us about some of the work you've done with these organizations? How has your Indigenous identity as well as other Indigenous identities influenced your work?
Yeah, definitely. I think, my story in activism and organizing really starts in 2015 and 16. I was involved in a community organization here in Albuquerque called Generation Justice. They're a multimedia journalism organization, and they do a lot of work to make sure that we're telling our stories to the public from our narrative, and make sure that we're telling them how they are supposed to be told and how we want them to be told, and not from someone else's perspective. So, I was fortunate enough to do a lot of work there. And then in 2016, my family actually took a trip out to Standing Rock and the Ochari Shokoan camp. We took different supplies and green chili from New Mexico. But I also got to go representing Generation Justice and collect interviews from different water protectors that had even, put their bodies on the line and be arrested up there. And I think, that was really a changing point for me, because I was really tired of being behind the camera, or being, behind, not being in front and like actually being able to participate. Um, and I'm still really grateful for my start in journalism, because I have such a deep love and respect for journalists, and what they do and their work is so important, especially when we're talking about movements like Standing Rock and Line 3 and all the different narratives. Enbridge can just basically buy a press agency to pump out whatever they want about their narrative about Line 3 and in support of it, whereas we have to rely on whatever the mainstream, most of the time we have to rely on whatever the mainstream is trying to push. So that's where I got my start. And after Standing Rock, I really was tired of being, like I said, behind the camera, and I wanted to get my feet like on the ground and do more organizing. And so that's where I transitioned over to the Southwest Organizing Project, SWAP, here in Albuquerque. And I was also really fortunate to have really supportive teachers at NACA. They, like, if you talk to any of my teachers that had me, they know that I missed class, and my academics suffered because of the dedication that I had to social justice. But that being said, because NACA is the type of place to support the decisions that I made for myself to follow this path, I was able, to get chances to still make up those credits and things like that. But since then, I've done a lot of different work. I co-founded Fight for Our Lives, which started out of the March for Our Lives movement, and did a bunch of different campaigns around, gun violence prevention, as well as climate crisis action. And then more recently in 2020, we've done a lot of mutual aid work. And so that's the gist of all of what I've done. I think if there's a highlight of it for me, is definitely the mutual aid work throughout the pandemic. So being able to come together in a network of people and say, there are at-risk people in our communities that aren't getting the resources that they need from the state or from other agencies, and we need to step up to do something to help them. And so to see that network take off and now serve and feed over 60,000 families, or 60,000 New Mexicans and over 10,000 families, is just incredible. And yeah, that's all of the work that I've been involved in. And yeah, I think that covers your question.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, that's another reason why I really like NACA. It's they've always been like really supportive whenever I end up like missing classes and like missing school days to go protest against things, because like just the kind of school we are, they want us to do that. Like the teachers there have always been great and are constantly pushing us to do those kind of things, and it's great. But and then now, Seneca, what is yucca, and why should people, but especially young people, care about climate justice? What ways do you think young people can support in the climate justice movement?
So yucca stands for Youth United for Climate Crisis Action. And yucca started in the summer of 2019 out of, let's see, so Earth Care is another community organization based in Santa Fe, and they held something called the El Puente Leadership Academy. And it was kind of a couple weeks long summer program, basically, that was able to really break down a lot of the issues that we're facing in the world today. Talking, as I mentioned before, it was able to break things down into like, what are the issues we're facing? Why are they there? Like, if we want to change anything, like what are the barriers that are in our way? Like, how would we create change? And I think through that program, it really kind of, I'm not sure to say this, I guess, like lit the fire in a lot of people in a lot of young people, to start like organizing and creating change. And from there, we were able to start organizing specifically around the climate strikes that were happening, like with Greta Thunberg and Fridays for the Future and all sorts of stuff like that. And so we're first planning to organize specifically around the September global climate strike. And yeah, it started off with a group of maybe like, 10 or 11 young people who just wanted to see change. And then we were able to like reach out through our families, our friends, the school systems, local businesses, all sorts of things, in order to like really mobilize all the young people in the city around this big climate strike that was going to be happening. And we ended up getting a couple thousand people. It was probably like the biggest gathering of young people I've seen in Santa Fe, at least, because there's frankly not a lot for people to do in Santa Fe. So I don't see a lot of young people just kind of running around in that way. And it was, really amazing and really powerful. And there we had 5 demands for our governor, basically just asking for her to really throw her weight behind creating a just transition and creating that quickly to end our dependence on fossil fuels. And so, after such a big strike, we ended up, deciding to kind of continue our momentum. And so we've done all sorts of work since then, from, doing things like teach-ins to doing very more, like theatrical things to like help gather awareness. Like something that Yucca kind of got a lot of attention for was, it was last year, right before the legislative session, we built a like giant guillotine right outside of the roundhouse. It was, a fake guillotine, obviously. But and it was like the little ropes that were holding the blade was like frozen in ice, kind of representing like, the longer that there's inaction in New Mexico, like these are going to have like direct impacts on future generations, and these are like directly going to result in deaths if we don't do everything in our power now to start building the foundations for what a just transition to a green future would look like. So we do stuff like that, as well as like legislative and policy work and things like that. So we talk to like specific legislators or people that represent us about what our priorities are, and how we could work together if that was if their priorities aligned with ours, if their values align with ours. We've given testimonies on specific bills, we've spread information, all sorts of stuff like that. So that's kind of an overview of what Yucca does. We're all, always busy, always doing something. And so we actually have like open meetings if any youth is interested. About once or twice a month, we will have open meetings to like bring people into our work and get people involved. So if anyone's interested, we'd love to have you. I'm sorry, I forgot the other parts of your question. But that's Yucca.
Yeah, all right, thank you for that. The little other part was just what ways do you think young people can support in the climate justice movement? So what other ways do you think like just other people like just can also help in just different ways, even just small ways?
Yeah. So I think you can kind of break it down into 2 ways, I guess. So one would be more like, I guess personally, like talking with people like your friends and your family about, about the climate crisis, about what climate justice means to you. Because I feel like I can guarantee everyone knows at least like 1 or 2 people that, maybe doesn't believe in climate change or just doesn't see the urgency of it or think people are overreacting. Like I've dedicated a whole lot of time to this work, and I still find myself having to talk to some of my friends and family members and being like, hey, there's this, really important thing happening, or like, hey, these people, they're being hurt, they're being killed by the effects of climate change. And like, being able to like reach people in your own life about those sorts of things, because I think a lot of people tend to be really stubborn. And if you have a personal relationship with that person, you're a lot more likely to get through to them than, like a stranger they might see speaking into a microphone. So that, that kind of work behind the scenes is incredibly valuable. I think I'd also add, like the other side of it is getting involved with community organizing. I mean, I think all the speakers here have talked about what it meant to them to be a part of something, something bigger and something that can give back. And so joining in with the people who are organizing around you can really make a big impact, because, community organizing only works if there's the community behind it, if we have the people power. And so like it makes a difference if, you know, you're joining along to, you know, whether it's like, you know, making a phone call or like marching in the streets or, you know, just showing up to meetings, whatever it is, like it really does make a big difference in how far we can move along the work and how fast it moves. Because it's very important to put a lot of pressure on, a lot of public pressure on the people we're targeting. A lot of times that's representatives, but that can be other people as well. And so the more people that are, you know, very like out and proud and like being part of this work, that are like actually there. I don't know how to explain this correctly, but yeah, I think just being there honestly makes a really big difference. So getting involved with whoever is like in your city, in your town, in your family, really goes a long way.
All right, yeah, I completely agree with that. Just even being just like there, not even just like yelling, hey, this is what we want, but at least just being there is very important. Or yeah, just talking to your family about it. I like to try to be like really active in that kind of stuff. So I've like participated in like lots of protests, and I believe it's very important. Currently I'm in Washington D.C. Just got here a few hours ago. I'm getting prepared for a protest for against fossil fuels and like its impact for like with different industries and how it's gonna like end up like bringing a huge impact on like violence against like women and especially like Native women. So I'm here doing that, and then I've also gone to like I was saying earlier, I've missed like school several times, both in elementary and now in middle school. Like leaving to just like go do as many protests as I can to just like try to bring like as much awareness to the situation as possible. I've gone to Hawaii to protest the telescope in Mauna Kea. I've like gone to 2 different marches against like the Black Lives Matter. I just believe it's very important, like you were saying, to just do as much as you can, even if it's just like the smallest thing, just calling somebody up and saying, hey, can I talk to you about this? It's really important and I think you should know about it. I just fully agree with you on that. It's great to start at an early age, and I'm just so proud of just you and our other panelists for just doing like everything that they can to bring awareness to all of this kind of stuff. You guys are great. Thank you to all of our speakers for your responses. And now we're gonna have time for a Q&A from the audience. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and me and Mai will, or like if like the panelists, they see them in the chat, they'll answer them. So yeah, if you have any questions, please tell us.
Connor, it looks like Jen has their hand.
Oh, yeah, I just saw that. All right, Jen, feel free to say a question. Oh, I don't think we can hear you, or at least I can't hear you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I said it looks like
right.
Nova put their question like just before me, so maybe they should go first in the chat.
All right, I guess. All right, I'm assuming this is to all our panelists. What would a fair world look like to you? Would any of the panelists like to start us off on that? Kalani, how about you be the first to answer this question?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Oh, yes. And if you need to relook at it any time, again, while you're answering it, it's in the chat. But what would a fair world look like to you?
That's hard. I don't think there can be a fair world because everything happens for a reason. Probably having a fair world wouldn't have this right now, having this meeting.
Well, when Ms. Braza added to the question, I might make it a bit easier for you to answer. What are some changes that you would like to see in our world that would make it a better place to live, just overall?
Clean water. Water's life.
Yeah, that's a huge one. I can fully agree with that. Would any of our other panelists like to answer that question? Feel free to just unmute.
People have their own house, and people have their own water and food, and in their own room.
That's great there. Thank you. All right, let's move on to our next question. What are you feeling passionate about right now? Or what should we be paying attention to? Any of our panelists, feel free to unmute. How about we start with Jonathan?
Yeah, definitely. I was just going to jump in. I think, something that's really on my mind recently, and I think that particularly here in New Mexico, we all need to be paying attention to is this year in general, but this past spring specifically has been a record-breaking season for our fossil fuel industry. They made a record profit in April. That's a number that their office has never seen before in the state. And for a short time, I believe is in February, we actually overtook North Dakota, and we were the second largest producer of oil and natural gas in the country, which really translates to the world. And with those numbers, right here in New Mexico, our extractive industries are fueling the climate crisis, and our elected officials, and even people that are complacent and not paying attention to this are directly responsible because it's happening here. I think there's a lot of tendency to think, oh, this is happening somewhere else. There's not much I can do, but no, it's right here in New Mexico. We're the second, third largest producing the state of oil and natural gas in our country, and we have been for the past 10 years. And even if we were to cut emissions completely tomorrow, our planet wouldn't stop warming at a rapid rate for several decades. So, just really realizing that here in New Mexico, we have such a high responsibility, and our elected officials and our industry here have such a high responsibility. But with that, we also can show the country and the world what Indigenous leadership looks like when it comes to solving the climate crisis. And I think that that's, the unique opportunity that we're in with, a state like New Mexico that has such a high Indigenous population and so many tribes just located here. And they're the ones at risk. They're the ones that have been fighting for generations against extractive industry. And yeah, I think that's what's on my mind now, is just recognizing that it's such a local problem and not something that is happening far away.
That was a great response. Thank you, Jonathan. Would any other panelists like to answer this question, or should I move on to the next?
Real quick, I'll just add on a little bit to Jonathan's answer. Like, I'll definitely second everything he's been saying. And I'll also just add that, like, a lot of the times, I think when our state talks about like, oh, we're doing really good, like all these different things as far as like emissions and climate change, they're really only concerned with our like domestic emissions, like the emissions like within New Mexico of like maybe extraction or transportation, whatever it is. But I think it's important to recognize, as Jonathan was saying, that these have like a national and global impact. Like, we're not measuring our emissions by, what it takes to get the oil out of the ground, and then the emissions that come out when the oil is used. They're not counting like the actual emissions that come from the use of these extractive industries and these fossil fuels. And so I think being able to like really like read between the lines and understand like the data that's being thrown at us, just to recognize that, like, I don't know, we like, as Jonathan was saying, really I'm just saying everything Jonathan was saying, but just like starting locally and within our state, and understanding how it all branches outward, and how like pollution doesn't stop at our state borders. We need to understand how we're impacting all the states around us, like understanding why we have such an extreme drought now and how it's only going to get worse. Just seeing how we impact everything around us, and being able to understand that like our domestic emissions are a lot more than just that than what we're counting.
Yeah, just amazing responses, both of you guys. Thank you for that. How about Jen, what was your question?
Yeah, so I facilitated the elders panel this morning, and we hope that the panels would complement each other. So my question is, what's something you want older people and elders to know? If you could get them to understand like one thing, or not just one thing, but like what do you really wish that you could like help them understand, or what advice would you have for them? Because one of the questions I asked them is, what advice do you have for young people? So, yeah.
I guess I can jump in real quick, and something that immediately jumps to my mind, and I don't see this as much in our communities and Indigenous communities, but I think that there is this preconceived notion that young people just don't care, and that they don't have, particularly in politics and organizing and these issues that are generally seen as as like adult topics or something. And just pushing back about that and saying that we do care, and we're here to carry on the work that we know so many of the elders that have come before us have put on their entire life's work into, and just with that we're here to listen and learn from from their knowledge and their wisdom that they've gained doing this work throughout their lives. And yeah, I guess that's what comes to my mind.
I think.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, you're good. Yeah. I think for me, it's also just asking that they like invite us into their spaces, because I think sometimes it's hard to find intergenerational spaces and adults and elders who are willing to like not just work with us but really trust us and what we have to say. And so like if we don't know something, teach it to us, don't shame us for not knowing it. And to just like, how do I say it, like not just like, oh, like once a year this is when we will invite the young people in to talk about this. Like we're all part of this community together, and it's important to like we recognize that it's good to have spaces like for young people to organize or for elders to organize, but like consistently having intergenerational spaces where they they can teach us and we can teach them as well, because I think we have a different perspective growing up in the age that we're in right now. And especially in COVID, when I've seen a lot of people like get shut out because it's difficult for them to work with like technology and Zoom and all these different things. And so just continually having that open relationship and open invitation between each other, that, you know, we can meet, we can like work with and trust each other, and that we can learn from each other, with an open mind and open heart.
All right, thank you, Seneca. I think we're only going to do one more question for since we're only going to answer one more question for like time reasons, but let's answer this one. When did you become interested in helping or participating with events or being aware of what's happening? Bear, would you like to answer this one? When did you start becoming interested in this stuff?
Helping the radiation.
Why do you like helping the Red Nation?
Because it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
And we have painting.
Oh yeah. You helped us with that banner, huh?
Yeah. And we do work here too.
What kind of work do you do here?
Clean and do medicine to make sure the evil spirits don't come. And that's all.
That's really important work, Bear. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Bear. Kalani, how about you answer the question too?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, of course. When did you become interested in helping or participating with events?
It just came into my life. It was an opportunity to go in Red Nation. It's a very powerful group, and they make a lot of difference. And I'll probably still continue now, and help out with Red Nation. Being an activist. It's a great, yeah. Thank you.
All right, yeah, thank you, Kalani. Seneca, when did you become interested in helping and or participating in current events?
Honestly, I think for as long as like I was able to understand what was going on around me. I remember being in 6th grade. At the time, I didn't know I was a queer person, and hearing all the debate about like, you know, oh, should gay people have the right to marry? And I remember going around to my friends at recess being like, well, what do you think? What do you think? And I couldn't fathom that like they didn't have an opinion, or like that they didn't like care, or just different stuff like that. And then also just growing up hearing about all these different issues, like, you know, happening like either back home in Oklahoma or like in our own community, just as the world, as I got to know more about like what was happening around me, I think always just been interested in at least I think knowing about it for myself. And then I didn't really know how to like turn it outwards, I guess, until probably like 8th or 9th grade, when I started getting a little bit more involved in like I think similar to like what Jonathan was saying, like gun violence prevention and stuff like that. I think that's actually how I met Jonathan. He was organizing in Albuquerque and I was helping organize in Santa Fe. And that's organizing like, strikes around, gun control and stuff like that in Santa Fe was what kind of like the first little like taste of being able to like, I have all this information, all these like different, really strong like feelings and opinions. And it's the first chance to be able to like turn it outward into something bigger. And that was kind of like my intro into community organizing, and specifically in spaces like for and by young people. And eventually that led into like the climate organizing that I'm in today. But, yeah.
I can,
yeah, John. Yeah, I was just about to call you Jonathan.
Yeah, I can jump in, and it's kind of a two-parted answer for me, just because of the space that we're in. One of the first like rally that I'd ever gone to, I was like, there's a photo of me, I hate it. I was like 14 or 13 at the time, but it was actually a Red Nation rally for Indigenous Peoples Day. So it actually, I think, was like either today or yesterday was the anniversary, or it's about to pass. But yeah, and just that feeling of being in a crowd and like chanting and being in solidarity and having like a common goal, and a purpose, and knowing that we're not just here to march through the streets. There's actually a strategy behind it, and people's attention that we're trying to get, and a message we're trying to spread, particularly during the time, because this was before Tim Keller was elected, so we were still dealing with a really conservative administration that refused to even acknowledge that Indigenous Peoples Day, and was still having Columbus Day celebrations. And so that's like one of the first like introductions I had to these spaces, and really made me want to keep doing that work, just because, like I said, the feeling, I think people will relate, like the first time you're in a crowd like that, it's just a feeling that you can't really describe, but it's really empowering. And then the second part of that question comes from NACA, in a space that they actually allowed me to participate in through, I think it's through the OST program, or just, it was, actually there was a couple of different cohorts that went from NACA, and one was from like the student support services, and one was from OST. But it was called Organizing Youth Engagement. And so it was a statewide conference that brought together hundreds of young people to discuss issues that are happening in our community. And at the end of the conference, we gave presentations of like how we wanted to solve these issues to decision makers and lawmakers that came to hear us. And so through those spaces, I really, and being around, I think something that stuck out to me was, I really relate to what Seneca said, being, I'm sure if you've probably heard about it if we went to NACA at the same time, but being the student that's like really socially active and always wanting to like provoke questions, and realizing that not everyone around you has like an opinion formulated yet, can be really frustrating. But being in that space like Oye, where everyone came together and like was actually working like to solve those issues and had an opinion, was really empowering, and made me realize that young people are at the forefronts of creating change, and they have so many great solutions. And yeah, that's, I guess, when I first got like my feet into the ground was, like Seneca said, around March for Our Lives and gun violence prevention. And I think the important part for us was realizing that what they're saying on the national level, so what the Parkland kids were saying at the time, it's really funny. They've strayed pretty a lot further left than they originally were, and they're kind of changed their stances, a lot of them. But at the time, we were really pushing back against their narrative of what gun violence looks like, and their solutions of fortifying schools and wanting not necessarily to arm teachers, but wanting more protection for schools. And so pushing back against that, and saying that here, particularly in Albuquerque in New Mexico, gun violence looks so much different. It looks like youth suicides and street violence, and those have different solutions. Those don't look like fortifying schools at all. It looks like making sure our students have the right resources they need to succeed. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everybody, so much for teaching us about leadership and community change. I think it's important for everybody to realize that youth are powerful, and it's always been young people on the front lines of change. And now we're going to end with a closing poem from our very own Mai Fry.
Thank you, Connor. In the eyes of society, queer Indigenous youth and Two-Spirit Indigenous youth are seen as imperfect and bewildered. But when queer youth are open about it, we are shut down due to our internalized homophobia and racism. The LGBTQ youth of today aren't scared, but rather discouraged from being who they want to be, who they need to be. The Indigenous youth of today aren't scared. They're discouraged by society to be who they are since day one. We are discouraged to be flawless in our own minds, and society will never see us as flawless. But I want everyone in the room to think about this. Why would you waste your time telling youth they are wasting their time and discouraging them to be who they need to be? Because if you're discouraging someone to be something who they are, you were never really the person you wanted to be in the first place.
Nice. Can we look at all those emojis? Let's give it up for our youth and our youth panelists. Tawai, Safa, everyone. Thank you so much. Good job, everyone. That was awesome. Thank you, everyone, for attending this youth panel. It was great to see all the young people here, especially all the adults too. And the teachers, woo, Miss Maxman, supporting and centering our young people.